Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Sorry that it's been a while. Today is the start of a series, a new series I've been thinking of doing. It's combining my intellectual and my intellectual interests, and as well as my interest in woodworking. I've noticed that myself, I love watching woodworking videos, and I like at the same time to listen to something like a political discussion or something of that nature. So sometimes I'll put the woodworking video on and turn down the sound, and then listen to whatever it is. Could be Jeremy from the Quartering, or could be SSM, or could be Tim Pool, anything like that. So such is the attention span of the modern person. So here, the first article I'm going to do is entitled The Anatomy of Schadenfreude, or Montaigne's Laughter. The author of the article is David Carroll Simon, and the essay or the article can be found in the journal Critical Inquiry, number 43, winter of 2017. And that's a journal of the University of Chicago. So I accessed it online, and I'll put the extension here for you so that you can access it. And generally, the author is talking about one of Montaigne's essays, and it's essay 50, I believe, from volume 3 of his essays, and I accessed it online too. It is, volume 8, sorry. So it's volume 8 of, essay 50 of volume 8, and the title is Of Democritus and Heraclitus. So I accessed that online as well from Gutenberg, and I'll put the extension there as well. So it's Montaigne's essay is very short, and the article is based on it, Simon's article. And Simon's not so much making an argument as sort of laying the groundwork for the context of Montaigne's essay. So putting in historical context, both the history of approaches to, philosophical approaches to the subject of laughter, and also the idea of Schadenfreude. You should say, well, what's the connection between Schadenfreude, which is a German word for, let's see what he says here, the exact definition of, so Schadenfreude is from two German words, harm, Schaden, and Freude, joy. So we know it as basically shameful joy or taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. And so it's a concept that Aristotle brought up. It's a concept, and clearly I don't think Plato mentions it specifically, but he does talk about how people can take pleasure in doing bad. But this isn't doing bad. It's watching or witnessing or thinking about someone else's misfortune. And so a great number of philosophers have dealt with the topic, not only Aristotle and Montaigne, but Robert Burton in his famous work, The Anatomy of Melancholy, which I haven't read, but which I definitely would like to read at some point. The author also quotes or references Adam Smith's work, which I haven't read either. What's it called here? Adam Smith, famous from, of course, the political writings on free market and capitalism and so on. So the book is The Theory of Moral Sentiments. So that sounds like a kind of a cool thing. Now, basic backdrop here, of course, is the whole, the philosophical analysis of laughter. And laughter is such a weird thing when you think about it. And there's two sides to laughter, and those two sides, I think the author of this article, Simon, is analyzing is basically there's a fear side and there's a pleasure side, a fear slash relief. He sees as registering that sort of weirdness. And I think that you can see that when you think of laughter, like laughter leads to tears so often, doesn't it? And I don't mean just, because laughter excites your eyes or something or whatever, but do you ever start laughing and then end up crying? Sometimes the opposite happens, I suppose, but I've seen it with babies and I've experienced it myself. And so one of the sources that that would have influenced Montaigne in this case sort of looked at sort of the weird, when you think of like sort of an earlier form of physiology or whatever, sort of, the idea of the humors and all that. So there was an author named Laurent Jourbet, wrote a treatise on laughter, and I think, and the author says that Montaigne was definitely indebted to Jourbet's essay or book or whatever, and here we have the idea that there's laughter is a weird thing of physiological like talk about the constriction and enlargement of the heart, and there's this weird sort of palpitation inside your body or inside your soul becomes a palpitation, this strange thing called laughter. So in this article, Simon's not really interested in the morality of laughter per se, but he is interested in what Montaigne's position, sort of what does Montaigne make of it. And he examines that. It's a very short little essay in Montaigne's big book of essays, and take you 5 minutes to read. That's the, as I said, the of Democritus and Heraclitus. It's like a 5-minute read, and the reason why the essay is called Of Democritus and Heraclitus is Democritus was the guy who derided, both of these guys in a way were disgusted or had a negative view of the world, but Democritus, his response was scorn and laughter at the world and its absurdity, whereas Heraclitus felt misery and sadness when he thought about the world's ridiculousness. So think of those words like ridiculous, ridicule, ridiculous. We think of ridiculous as absurd, and there's a connection there. There's this physiological, or not just physiological, but intellectual and emotional response to the absurd, which makes us pity it or hate it, right? And so the author also references Thomas Hobbes, and so Hobbes is saying laughter or comedy or laughter is the result of seeing something out of place or something disproportionate or whatever. So of course there's no easy explanation for humor. If we knew the key to humor, then being a comedian would be a pretty simple thing of just sort of learning the rules of comedy and applying them. But that's not, comedy is much too subtle for that. But of course we can point to some general aspects, right? We can say that comedy is a juxtaposition of something. It's seeing something in a new and unusual and absurd light. Now, bad happening to somebody, it has the basic structure of a joke, right? In that sense that, one thing that I always think about is I don't laugh at people when they fall down. but people do all the time. It's almost automatic to people. Those YouTube channels of Fail Army. Fail Army is basically just, again, again and again watching people fall down and finding humor in that. I don't find humor in people falling down because, well, I feel sorry for I feel sorry for people who fall down. I feel sympathy. I know what it's like to fall down. It's embarrassing and sometimes it hurts, and so I don't find that particularly funny. But I can see that there's different aspects in that. Like, some people react to something like that, and they disguise their displeasure in seeing that, and they laugh. Like, I've seen people laugh in the face of discomfort. So it's not derision, but seeing someone fall, like particularly a fat person fall down, and laughing at it, it's sort of like there's an aspect of they're getting what they deserve because they're bad people because they eat too much. So there's that aspect there that people feel, and that's part of what Simon is talking about in his article, which is like how much of laughter is derisive, and that obviously that has a moral element, and traditionally, like ever since Aristotle, we'd say it's a sign of an immoral person to take pleasure in another person's pain. I think we can pretty much agree on that. But what about when we see someone getting their just desserts? Is that would a moral person find that funny though? Like for instance, say if Hitler at one of his big rallies, fell down the stairs or something. Is that funny? I don't. It's not something that I would necessarily find funny. The videos, for instance, of President Biden falling down the airplane stairs, is sort of funny because it happens 3 times in a row. So it's not that I feel I don't respect Joe Biden, but the sight of an old man falling down is not funny to me. And of course there's that video where Joe Biden's on his bicycle and he falls down. And to me, it's not the falling down of Joe Biden that's funny because I disrespect him. Like if I saw Justin Trudeau fall down, I wouldn't by itself find that funny. But the case of Joe Biden falling off his bike is sort of funny because some commentators have said that Biden stopped because he saw a little girl and he wanted to go and talk to the little girl. Now, that is kind of funny because Joe Biden, I don't have to point out the obvious here that Joe Biden has a reputation in some quarters of being a little too overly interested in females of all ages. And combining him falling off his bike, a president, an old man, falling off his bike because he sees a little girl that he wants to talk to, who has a reputation of being a little bit handsy and kissy with little girls as it is. Well, that's kind of funny. So I don't see that as Schadenfreude necessarily. Well, I suppose it is because, okay, now Schadenfreude, for a pedophile. Okay, what about those Chris Hansen videos where where he sort of catches pedophiles in the act, kind of, and not in the act, but in meeting young people, and sometimes those videos are funny, but the principle in general is not funny to me. I feel sorry for pedophiles in that sense. Like there's there's a horror, right? But there's also a pity that go hand in hand. Um, but I guess, because I'm not aware of their actual misdeeds, I'm just seeing them in one moment where they're caught before they can do a misdeed. So I don't know what they've done or what they will do. So there's an innocence about the whole thing. So in this article, Simon gives the example of seeing a boat out, looking at a boat from land and seeing it sink and seeing the people drowning and finding humor in that. Now, that seems to me is pretty immoral. How could a person find humor in that? That surely is Schadenfreude. But what does it mean? And Simon talks a lot about what role a sort of a superiority plays, but also relief. You laugh at them as a sort of relief that it's not happening to you. So that's another dimension. So how much of Schadenfreude is our fear that the same thing could happen to us, and kind of relief that it isn't. And it's our sense of the fragility of human life. So in this little essay, Montaigne talks about, he says that, let me just check here. He said that of three different philosophers, he said, oh gosh, here it is. I'm sorry, I'm a little disorganized here. He says that death is terrible to Cicero, coveted by Cato, indifferent to Socrates. Okay, so how we feel about death and danger and suffering certainly would flavor our relationship with Schadenfreude and our relationship with humor. So, and that is in the end the bottom line. So Montaigne says he's closer to Democritus than Heraclitus, because and I don't know Montaigne well enough, but I think there's a bit of humor and irony in Montaigne's essays. So I don't know how much we should take him literally to this extent. But he says that he more sides with Democritus, because he says, he says, for I'm clearly of the first humor, that is Democritus, not because it is more pleasant to laugh than to weep, but because it expresses more contempt and condemnation than the other. And I think we can never be despised according to our full desert. Okay, so there's a very negative view of the human condition. It's not just the human condition, but human moral condition and the I guess the absurdity of human life, to borrow a modern philosophical phrase. His last sentence is, "Our condition is as ridiculous as risible." So it's the relationship between the absurdity of human life and how we should despise it, or do despise it, and how we should laugh at it. That there's a correlation between all these things. I think there was a really cool there's a really cool couple sentences here in the last paragraph as well, where he talks about the Roman Statilius. When Brutus courted him into the conspiracy against Caesar, he was satisfied that the enterprise was just, but he did not think mankind worthy of a wise man's concern. So isn't that cool? So yeah, he thinks that Caesar should have died, but Statilius says, basically saying that Caesar's the world's problem, and the world is unworthy of my attention, basically. I found that to be really interesting. So anyway, comedy, humor, Schadenfreude, these are concepts that have that Simon is telling us that have to do with our opinion of the world and our opinion of ourself with respect to it. So we are above the world. Are we a part of the world? Is the world above us? And all these things define our sense of humor and the scorn that we do or do not attach to our laughter and to our comedy, right? In that sense. Obviously, I would love to look further into the topic of Schadenfreude. And it's interesting how the whole idea that virtue informs and directs our taste, right? Okay, so let me say that again. Virtue, our moral view, affects our taste. Okay, so I would argue that because I don't think it's funny, that people falling down is funny, that's a statement of my moral status. Whether my moral status is high or low because of that, well, that's something that we can argue about, but definitely it's a reflection of my morality, isn't it? I don't find it funny. I don't find tragedy funny, right? And what does it say about someone who does? And the kinds of things, the kinds of misfortunes that a person can find funny or can't find funny. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this format. I hope you find it thoughtful, and I hope you find my my work in the garage there kind of interesting. But anyway, this is my first try, and hopefully it'll work out. Okay, have a great day, guys.